right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our panel on European philanthropy's role in addressing global challenges. And we have a truly global panel, actually, to have this discussion. And I'll introduce our speakers in just a moment. My name is Melissa Stevens, and I'm the Executive Director of the Milken Institute Center for Strategic Philanthropy. And our overall goal is to improve the ROI of philanthropic capital, and we work closely with families and foundations to design and implement their giving strategies. And it's really a privilege to be here in London and having this conversation about European philanthropy because it is such a vibrant and dynamic ecosystem here. Europe is home to 130,000 public benefit foundations. That's more than we have in the United States. And between foundations and individuals, there is about 80 billion euros worth of giving that happens here in Europe. In addition to that, we see that Europe has what we call a high vitality score. So it's a high expenditure to asset ratio. So European foundations aren't just building endowments, they are putting capital to work to get things done. And finally, if we look at the latest individual philanthropic index, Europe has the highest innovation score of any region around the world. And this means that they care a lot about results-driven, entrepreneurial philanthropy, sustainability, and high impact. And so a lot of themes that we want to explore today. And all of this is so important because we're having this discussion against a backdrop of truly global challenges. We're facing climate change, an aging population, stark inequality, and many others that are being discussed here today. And so we want to talk about the role of philanthropy in being part of that solution. Certainly, philanthropy can't solve all of these problems on its own, but it can be a partner with government, with capital markets, and amongst foundations and philanthropists to help us get closer to solutions. So I'm very excited about the panelists that we have with us for this discussion. So let me introduce you. First, we have Michelle Dorion, who is our late-breaking addition to the panel. So we thank Michelle for joining us as a panelist just this morning. Michelle leads a sixth-generation family office. She is with the Bacardi family and has also started a nonprofit organization, the Institute for Imagination, all of which we'll hear more about. Next, we have Sir Michael Hinsey, who's the founder, chief executive, and senior investment officer of CQS, which is a multi-strategy asset management firm. Sir Michael has been called one of the most notable philanthropists in the hedge fund industry, and of course, with due reason. He's supported more than 200 charities across a range of issues, from the arts, health, science, the military, religion, etc. So really glad to have you here with us. And then we have Alisa Swidler. Alisa is a philanthropist and an activist. She's been called the most connected woman in London, and she is involved with a whole host of efforts, both locally with the Mayor's Fund, many efforts internationally, Africa Outreach Project, just to name a few. Alisa has 5 children, and so we're so glad that you carved out the time to be here with us today. And last but not least, we have Mr. Charles Chen, who is going to be speaking a little bit later in the panel. Charles is one of the founders of Tencent Holdings Limited, which is China's largest internet portal. He is here to talk a bit about an education innovation prize that he has established, the Yidan Prize, and we look forward to your remarks later. So with that as a backdrop, we'll get started. And Sir Michael, I'd like to start with you to just begin the conversation by sharing with us sort of your personal sort of journey and philosophy that underpins all of your giving. Obviously there's you've given to a lot of different areas, but what really has sort of is sort of the grounding principles of your philanthropy?
Okay. Well, one thing that's clear at the moment, it's not exactly strategic. I mean, you can't be strategic with 200, but there's no question there are themes. The first theme is those who've actually helped me in my life. I want to make sure I enhance their ability who've made my life better, to enhance their their situation. The other thing I want to talk about basically is those people who inspire me. But the context of all that inspiration, frankly, comes down to the fact that there is a need to give. In one of my traditions, it's zadacha, the need to give a money or give your time to an event. That is a Jewish tradition. Or, and I guess I'm a Catholic. You've got the Luke 12:48. To those much has been given, much is expected. So you have both those things. You have the tzedakah, which is something that comes from the soul, and the other thing, which is actually an obligation to do that. And how do I do that? And, where does that go? I've looked at educational institutions that have helped me, whether it's University of Sydney, where I've done a number of things there for my college. There we built a building. We did a new chair. We did the first chair for actually decades in that, and now it's going. In fact, but the key is actually how do you start it? When I started with the University of Sydney, this was after years of what I consider massive socialism. If you remember, we had money was being given by the government, and that stopped people giving. So what I did, my first gift was to help fund the chair. It's not even chair. The person who actually was the development officer. Mm-hmm. So that's a big deal. But it goes on. I mean, so we've got that in the education. So I obviously give to Harvard Business School. God knows if they really need it, but they've got a chair for me anyway. Mm-hmm. But and I'm happy to do that. And Princeton University, again, as part of the family thing, we've given a chair there, and it goes on. Then in the arts, again, I'm getting inspired by the arts, something which we love. So again, I've given to every museum in London, Victoria and Albert, natural history, and on. And again, that's there. But the real issue, I mean, where do I really get my kicks? And that's when people start inspiring me. And let's talk about people who inspire me in three contexts, if we've got a minute or two. The first is somebody like a Kevin Spacey. Not because he's an A-lister, and gosh, he's an A-lister. But the reality is, Kevin wanted to make a difference here at the Old Vic. When Kevin came, he said, there's a longer story how that happened, but when Kevin came, he was willing to give up, frankly, his income. And by the by, I think he gave up income, from my calculation, well over $100 million to do this Old Vic thing, to make this thing work, to give back and do things. I was inspired by him. I'm inspired by someone like Prince Charles. Again, yet another A-lister, but again, that is not the point. The point is seeing this man's passion about the world, his harmony context, how he wants to make the world to work, whether it's and one of the reasons why I do so much is actually in education, in environment, in the built environment, in various other things. So inspired by him and backing him to do various things. And then more recently, there's a chap called, again, you wouldn't have heard of him, but I hope you hear him now, a chap called David Capo, Monsignor David Capo, an Australian, very holy man, a man who has done a lot of work in mental health in Australia, and man, do we all need mental health work, but what David has done, he saw in Africa the fact that what was happening in Africa was that they did not have mental health, they had asylums, they had mental institutions, a disgrace to humanity, right? So in that context, David said, I'm going to give my time and my life, and I'm happy to back him to try to change the mental health system in Uganda. Not a lot of money, because again, it's time rather than money that works. Mm-hmm. And frankly, you put it through a system, there are a lot of leakages. And the reality is, if it works there in Uganda, it'll probably work in Kenya and various other places. Because again, mental health in today's world is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I can talk about, I mean, obviously, yeah. I've got another 200 things to talk about. Yeah. But again, it's the inspiration.
Yeah, so there's great responsibility and obligation with your philanthropy, but it's really grounded in the inspiration that you get from people who have a vision about how the world could be. And you're helping to fuel that.
Exactly. The other ridiculous thing is that, I mean, there are charities which really don't speak to me, but the people do speak to me. Uh-huh. I mean, we were talking about Thomas Heatherwick. I mean, do I really want to a bridge across a new bridge. But I look at a guy like Thomas Sedgwick and go, wow, that's his thought, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I don't want to steal your thunder here.
Yeah.
But that imagination is.
Yeah.
So I mean, do we need another bridge? Maybe not. But
we do need another Da Vinci.
We do need another Da Vinci, and he is another Da Vinci, by the way.
Well, Michelle, let me ask you to jump into this conversation. As you think about your family office, you're running the investments, you're also running the philanthropy, but all of it's really grounded in sort of a values-based approach to all of your investment. Can you tell us a bit about how you use those values as guiding principles?
Oh gosh, absolutely. But first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity of spending some time with you, and it is a real honor to be sitting here with Sir Michael. It's one of the people I've always admired in terms of his broad reach of his philanthropy, so it's terrific. And Alisa, I don't know you, but I will by the end of today, I promise.
Alisa makes sure you do.
That's right, the most connected woman in London. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that. Yes, no, we have been very values-based along the lines of Sir Michael, and that I think is just our family history. We started as immigrants. We lost everything in Prohibition, and then we lost it again in 1959 in Cuba when it was just taken away. So we were brought up to be thankful for what you have and to give before you take and think of others. So these are all sort of fundamental values. They're not necessarily religious. They're not necessarily cultural. They're just family values. And we always had this saying that my dad used to say to us, and that's actually what he was buried with, as bien y no mires a quien. Sorry for those of you who don't speak Spanish. It's do good, do well, do good, but don't even ask to whom. Just live a good life. And so everything that we do, it's not strategic necessarily, it's just the way we are, the way we do it. And that applies to our investments as well. We don't say, we're going to put a pot on impact investing because we want to do a good deed while we make money. It's just the investments that we look at have to have the components of social impact and environmental impact as well. Mm-hmm. It's just values driven, really.
Mm-hmm. So it's an entire approach. It's not
just
a particular asset class.
Yeah, it's just a way of being.
Yeah.
That comes from having lost it all and realizing that what you really have is people and connections. Uh-huh. The money goes. Uh-huh. The houses burn. The brands get stolen. Uh-huh. But at the end of the day, you still have to get up and brush yourself off. And keep going. Yeah.
Terrific. Alisa, let's bring you into the conversation here. So when we think about the changing role of philanthropy, think about the 3 T's that philanthropists can give. They can give of their treasures, so their finances. They can give of their ties or their networks, or they can give of their time. And you give to all 3, but do a lot with your ties and your time. And so can you talk a bit about how sort of the role you see of those assets being deployed, and how you've helped nonprofits by leveraging your time and your connections?
I think that I wish that most people saw it like that it is the 3 T's, because I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think, unfortunately, often people just see it as the treasures, and it really is a lot more than that. So for me, my biggest sort of underpinning value is to always say yes, even though that can lead to some mishaps. The idea of, if someone asks to have a meeting and there is literally no time in the day, there's still 10 minutes when I'm in the car, so I can have a phone call for 10 minutes and figure out how I can help that person. And there's no agenda for me. So it's just that maybe they need help with a project in Ghana or a project in Sydney, and there's no geographic kind of wall per se. And I by nature, I think concentrically. So I'm always thinking, maybe I can't help that person, but there are 4 other people I know who could help that person. And the idea of not wanting anything in return. It's just, again, perhaps that's just my nature, but there's no reason to say, that person is going to owe me favor, right? Uh-huh. It's not about that. And I think that I've found that there are kind of half people I know think like that, and half the other people are really more closed about making introductions and don't appreciate how valuable and how important it is, and how actually it's bang for your buck, because it's not a huge amount of time to make those introductions. Uh-huh. And they really can lead to a lot of different good things coming out of them. And a lot of people get help that way.
Right, right. Good. Yes, Mr. Michael?
You're talking about introduction. So I think the most effective philanthropy I've ever done is through an introduction. And again, I'll share a story with you. I do a lot, as I say, I do a lot with the military. I'm vice patron of the Royal Navy, Royal Marine charity. Again, we can talk about getting inspired by people. That's a big deal. So I do a lot of work there. The other, to that end, I meet a lot of very senior military officers, First Sea Lord, Second Sea Lord, all these guys, right? The other thing which I do, as I say, I've got a pretty broad reach, is like cartoons, right? And I like Ken Baker, and Ken Baker is through the Conservative Party. It's somebody I've got to know, and he runs the Cartoon Art Trust, and the most irreverent, most eclectic group of people through the Cartoon Art Trust. But one of the other things he runs is a educational charity on getting skills. Okay, so here we go, Navy, Royal Navy, Royal Marines, skills. And frankly, I know Ken very well, and the reality is, sorry, it's a slightly longer story, but I'd go and have lunch with Ken, and frankly, I started losing the will to live, but because by the time he finished, for the 5th time, telling me how we didn't have skills in this country. And he's right. And the reason why I started losing the will to live is because, what are you going to do? How are you going to change this wretched thing, right? That's the problem, okay? Yeah. So that's problem number 1, right? And then the military, I like doing things. So, and I also like cricket, okay? So there I've got George Zambellis, the First Sea Lord, at cricket, and by the by, this man was ferocious. By 12:30, not AM, but PM, but we had 4 pints of beer. And I mean, look, there's some of my friends down there in the room know that for me, that's a massive amount, not in my youth, but now, right? So 4 pints in an hour, I mean, I was hammered. But George at that stage was talking about the skill shortage in the Navy. I thought, bloody hell, Ken is now running this charity, and the government is wanting to do apprenticeships, right? So I said, listen, they said, George, I know what you're going to do. You've got to have a meeting. So I said, you've got to have a meeting with my friend Ken Baker, Lord Baker. And so we got that organised, but you can imagine the staffs. Can we please have briefing papers? You know, I mean, can we, both of them, right? The government, one's a government minister now. The other guy, can we have briefing papers? No. They're mates of mine. Just please have dinner. Or have lunch. Have a conversation. They had lunch. And so the First Sea Lord and Ken Baker had that lunch. By the end of the week, they were working on a project. The Navy now has engagement in not 1, not 2, but 20 UTCs, 20 of these university technical colleges. 20, and of which they own 1 and maybe 2. 1 they own 100%, and 2 they don't. The second one they own a piece. They own just a piece rather than being involved with. The reality is that massive impact just from what you're saying, Alisa, which is the knowing how to put people together, and that in itself didn't cost me anything. In fact, it probably cost me a bit of my liver and brain cells with George. but the reality is that if you can make the right connections, that is the most bang for the buck I've ever had for any charitable thing. Sorry, so I'm not sure it's a helpful story, but we've changed the world.
Yeah, yeah. Great. Well, I think there's a lot to unpack with that story. But let's take it a little bit, since you talked about impact. Let's talk about metrics for impact. And it feels as though there's been a shift in that philanthropists are really demanding. There's a desire to understand how they're to measure the impact that they're having. And so my question to you, and perhaps Michelle, we can start with you in terms of, is this desire to measure our impact, do we have a healthy obsession? Do we have an unhealthy obsession? How do we think about metrics, and how can it or cannot work in your philanthropy?
It depends which side of the argument you're in. If you're a donor, yes, you want metrics. You want to know that your funding is having the right kind of impact. If you're the one asking for money, it's really hard when they tell you that they want to have metrics. So there's both sides to that argument. But I think one of the things that we need to remember is metrics are great if they're the right metrics. At the Institute of Imagination, we work with small children. We work with empowering them and self-confidence and creating space in their head, and not just the neural networks, the physical networks in their brain, but also the ability to imagine a new future. how do you measure that? What's the right way of tracking that? And not everything should be measured. We sometimes go too far into making sure that the boxes are ticked. And sometimes you just have to, is Sir Michael measuring the impact that he had by connecting these two people? No. And sometimes the measurement keeps us from actually being effective. So I think measurements and metrics are important. The right kind of metrics are important. But not everything should be measured. Sometimes you just have to believe.
Alisa, what are your thoughts on this? Have you seen metrics work? Have you seen metrics hinder
I've seen it
philanthropy?
both. I think that I've done a lot of work in Liberia, pre and post Ebola, and depending on the organization, it depends on the team measuring, doing the evaluation. I think that's a huge part of it. And I think that again, in the post-Ebola Liberia, they were really able to, the organization I was working with was one of the only ones that stayed on the ground to provide healthcare. And they were really able to measure their impact. It actually was real numbers, and I trusted them. But at the same time, I've been actually doing a lot of work in Israel with the Association for the Welfare of Israeli Soldiers. And I love this organization, but they recently came and gave me a proposal, and I couldn't believe it, because I would never say this, but as a donor, I said, these numbers don't make sense. And everyone else was like, no, it's fine, it's fine. I was like, it's really not fine. And I had never come to that place where I thought, you need to break it down more, because even though it's tangible, it was a request for money for capital improvements to the bases, which again I was happy to make, but they weren't specific enough. And I also said, I can't take this to other donors. It had to, and there was no, again, there was no measurement of how many soldiers would be affected, just baseline numbers. So I actually came back and I was shocked that I was the one making the argument instead of saying, it was fine. And in the end, they came back and they gave me, I had them do it 2 more times, just because I wanted to be able to take it to other donors and say, this is an organization I'm really full in on support, and
Right.
You should support them too.
And if you're going to stand behind it.
Exactly.
You need to have all the confidence
Exactly.
in the data. So let's also talk about a bit of scale and sustainability. And Michael, you started your story, I think, was a sort of a good setup for that. How do you think about sustainability as a kind of a criteria that you're looking for when you're giving, and ensuring that the gifts and the grants that you're making are actually going to have some longevity and make real and lasting change?
No, I mean, look, your point is exactly correct, because I think it was Richard yesterday was talking about, either you have something that's sustainable or it's just purely dependent upon you. And frankly, dependent upon me is all well and good, but I need to make money every year, and I do make money every year, thank God, to actually pay for it. That's not a sustainable model, right? It really is not. You hope that these things will then have a life of their own. For instance, this you belong thing, which we're talking about, which is the Uganda thing. Within 4 years, if it's not doesn't have a life of its own, there's no point in my just writing a check every year. It doesn't get me there. And let's be clear. I've been through some journeys. We did one with a local museum, where initially I was the check writer, but it became clear that the model we had wasn't sustainable. We ended up having to redo the model to go back to what the core of that local museum was, which was education through things for local children, and that's what became sustainable, and we injected it into another area. And frankly, it's the waste point. You don't want it just to be dissipated. And a number of charities I've had, we've ended up having to make pretty tough-nosed business decisions to make sure that they are sustainable. You can spend it as much money as you want and not get the effect. So you really do have to think about it, which goes back to your metric point. But sustainability for me is a big point, because otherwise it's fine. Look, there are things which I give money to every year, which is, I'm very much into the battle of ideas. I'm a product of the free market. I believe in the free market. That, for the Institute of Economic Affairs, I've been a trustee there for last almost 10, 15 years, and I believe that I will keep giving money to that. My political engagement, I mean, that for me was, especially when I started, was a charitable giving. I mean, you give the money every year, they seem to spend it every year and then come back for more, you know. But you know, it's a different situation.
And Michelle, you want to jump in here, and I think you've been looking at some different sustainability models for your philanthropy as well.
Yes. But this is just going back to the metrics point. I think the metrics can be a very useful tool to drive not just the sustainability on an economic front, but also on the governance front. I think we mustn't forget that the governance is very, very important, particularly in the philanthropic and
it's linked to the money, right?
Completely.
Because we've seen some terrible examples where these charities have been plundered. You know.
Absolutely. So there's huge value to the metrics. They just have to be chosen wisely and managed even more wisely. But that links completely to the sustainability front. And then we at the Institute of Imagination absolutely are an organization that by design washes its face and carries its own weight. We are at an inflection point right now where we are now expanding. So we need that capital investment to actually get us to that point. But all our business models are driven through payment at the gate and retail offerings and IP, commercialization of our IP, all these different funding streams so that we don't have to depend on either donors or the government or any of these grant giving organizations. Absolutely, we have to stand on our own 2 feet. And that's anathema to some people. They go, well, but you're a charity. Well, yeah, but we have to survive, and we will. It gives you a discipline and a rigor that is very important.
Yep, great. But let's talk a little bit about sort of philanthropy in the global context. And we are living in an uber-connected world right now. And if we think about sort of the butterfly effect in chaos theory, that a butterfly flaps its wings on one side of the world and it creates a cyclone on the other side of the world. That we're so linked around the world. Having that global perspective. Alisa, I'm going to ask you to jump in here because you've worked globally, you've worked locally. So is this interconnectedness, this growing connectivity, how is that changing the way we think about global philanthropy? Do you think we're seeing a shift more towards global philanthropy at the expense of local philanthropy, or how do you think these two are changing and rebalancing?
I think for me it was a complete sort of reverse evolution, because I started out globally. And I was traveling, throughout West Africa and Southern Africa, and quite frankly, taking my children with me on various trips. And we were up actually near the Burkina Faso border in Ghana, and 2 of them were with me. It was honestly, I don't regret the trip, but it was a very rough graft. It was very hot. There was not a lot of food. We were sleeping on the floor for a week. We were putting in the first blood bank in northern Ghana. And we came home, and I've had all 5 of them in the car, and this was probably 5 years ago, I think. And I was driving, and one of my younger daughters said to my daughter who was on the trip, "Oh, how was Ghana? What did you see? How was life?" Blah, blah. And she said, "Oh, it was so great that Mom took us there because there are no poor people in London to help." And I thought, oh my God, really? It was like, oh my God, what have I done? I mean, it was really this moment of, I pulled the car over. I kind of had a moment of, we have a problem here. And luckily, actually, it coincided that week I had been introduced to Boris Johnson. And I was scheduled to have a meeting with him following on regarding potential becoming a trustee for the Mayor's Fund for London. So it all worked out. But it was a huge red flag to me. And actually, not that I scaled back my work abroad, but I figured out a way of balancing it and realizing how important it was for personal reasons to focus locally, but also because my family had been so involved in the global travels that actually it was really easy to get them involved in the local work. I think that, not to give you another story, but when I had taken one of my children to Liberia, and it was, again, it was pre-Ebola, about a month before the outbreak, and it was, again, a rough trip. But there was no running water, but a cell company had put a cell tower in. So he was able to post photos of our trip, in real time. And it was incredible because people would respond saying, I thought you were off grid. And he's like, well, I am off grid. But the idea of being able to send images and have this community here interact with him was fantastic. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. That's terrific. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of new financial models that are emerging in the philanthropy space. And Sir Michael, let me start with you. You had the opportunity to support Trinity Hospice, and in doing so took a very creative approach to financing that. And you could have written one check and sort of supported them, but you chose to take more of an underwriter role. Can you tell us about
Well, I did. I mean, there was a Trinity Hospice again. I guess charity does start at home, right? I mean, it's our local hospice, even though it goes down across the river from Battersea or Clapham Common all the way into Kensington now. But the point is that I did write a cheque. I think we wrote about, I can't remember how much we wrote, but we wrote about £1 million. But the problem is there wasn't enough, right? I mean, they needed £10.5 million to get this thing done, and we got up to about £6.5 million. And the reality was that we had very powerful supporters there, and we were able to raise money. But of course, at that stage, prices were running away from us in terms of building costs, and we were £6.5, we were £4 million short. And Camilla, Prince Charles's wife, she was our patron, so I knew we'd be able to raise money. But of course, the trustees could not go ahead and do it without. They couldn't do it. I mean, they couldn't put the charity into jeopardy. So I said, look, I'll do an underwriting. And there's this chap, Richard Bryans, who actually gets the joke, and we did it. We raised £4.5 million. I mean, I actually wrote a few more checks, but I mean, I didn't have to write the £4.5 million. And by the time we finished, he discharged my underwriting, and we've now got a beautiful hospice serving London and in Clapham Common, and that worked. Now, that was the model for me because I just understood it was, if you like, something which I did without much training. But it was clear that it had to be, because the problem was the trustees couldn't unbundle it. Interesting enough, I tried to do that in another educational institution, Ridley Hall in Cambridge, and these guys just couldn't get their heads around it. They just didn't want to do it. They didn't want it. So it's still not built. My money's still sitting in there in escrow. I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? But that actually worked very well. Yeah.
Great. So, Michelle, you've done some thinking about some innovative financial models, and we know that the UK has really led the way in this area with the work of Sir Ronald Cohen, and particularly around social impact bonds and pay for performance. So in that model, there's initial capital deployed to finance certain interventions, which would lead to a cost savings, and then those savings would then be passed on to the initial investors. Tell us a little bit about sort of you've thought
our journey in that.
Your journey in that, the utility of that, even though it may or may not be applicable to the work that you're doing.
It's very interesting because it's very appealing. Having come up through the banking world and understanding the capital markets, thinking, well, it'd be so much easier. To me, the offerings of something like the Institute of Origination could be so obvious to apply a capital markets funding model to. And the Peterborough prison social bond, that was a bellwether, and it was, very effective in what it was trying to do. But the more we looked at what we needed to do, and again, back to the metrics of what it is that we wanted to measure to be able to prove to the investors that we had achieved those deliverables that we had promised, we realized we were probably putting too much pressure on ourselves to get these, the children coming out of our doors had to all look the same to fit the uniformity that you need to get the results for the investors. So we thought, as appealing as it is, and we thought we were the poster child for social impact bonds because we are having such a positive impact on all of society, we thought. But the actual mechanics, when you get to the granularity of it, we thought it's not fair on the investors, and it's not fair on the people that come through our doors, and it's certainly not fair on us trying to chase it. So we're looking at it still to see if there's a blended model there. We've thought about equity or even sort of loans or getting intermediary sponsors. We have to find a campus. So is there somebody out there who could underwrite that campus for us while we get our capital campaign? So there's different models, but as lovely as the model is, we are not there yet as a charity.
Again, I mean, Ronnie Cohen's another, talking about inspirational people, Ronnie Cohen definitely is an inspirational person. And I invested in that bond.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And also, my charity invested but I assumed we'd lose all the money because I mean, as much as I liked, so I put the money into there because for me it was a charitable point. So a charity invested, or a foundation invested in it. But what was very clear to me, and it's a corollary, or it's a point that I think you're making, to do that you need a massive infrastructure to do it. I mean, one of the things which impressed me, I mean, I went to see Ronnie, and it was, he was Ronnie, always very dapper, nicely quoted, very elegant man, showed me the stuff, but then, and here are the people who are working on it. I mean, there was, what, 10, 15 people? I mean, people a whole team working on it, so it was properly underwritten and whatever, but it's a different model. It's one of the reasons why, and frankly, going to Ronnie, I knew he'd done the work, so I knew if anybody could succeed, he would. That's fine. But it's one of the reasons why I tend to give to bigger institutions, because I know at least there's going to be a deliverable off the back of that. So it's interesting. But that's social. As I said, we're there. It's happy days. I think it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, I know.
But the infrastructure to do that is huge. Just like the infrastructure the Gates Foundation has to try to cure, or for that matter, what Milken's doing here. To do what they're doing, they need an infrastructure. It's not putting a couple of pounds in somebody's pocket and hoping it's going to be okay. This is a proper business.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to build the ecosystem, the market, the demand.
Yeah.
And it's too difficult for the charities that are trying to get it. This is a whole capital markets banking institutional aspect, not the individual charities. And there's so many of us. As it is, there is an opportunity, I think, to bring these together, and maybe that's what Big Society Capital is trying to do.
Exactly right, and another good institution. But I mean, that's exactly what Michael Milken, through his work, through the work which the folks around this room are doing. I think that is where the power of it is, because again, we can plug into that and watch it go.
Right.
And that's why you do need metrics at one stage, right?
Right.
Because I can engage. I mean, I can engage at Trinity Hospitals. I can understand where that goes, and I can see the fundraising. I'm part of the fundraising, but. Have I changed the world? Yes, I have. Have I changed my society? Yes, I have. Have I changed the world? No, I haven't.
Right.
And the stuff which is being done here on cancer and things will change.
Right. And so if we think about there's 80 billion euros, given in Europe, but really, how do we move the trillions of dollars that are in the capital markets? Yeah. So some of these instruments will allow us to do that.
And allow government to do a better job. I mean, the ridiculous story which I gave earlier, I mean, both were government departments, both had money, they didn't talk to each other, right? I mean, so that's where the private can actually help the public.
Right.
The discourse.
Yeah, the discourse,
Yeah.
And that's where the time and the connection works.
Yep. Great. So let's talk a little bit about sort of future generations of philanthropy. Alisa, you talked a little bit about some taking your family with you on these trips. That's obviously very important to you. How do you sort of think about really instilling the philanthropic philosophies to the next generation and the importance of that?
I think because I started traveling when they were very young, and I had 5 children in 5 years. So I always felt like I couldn't.
Well done.
I didn't feel like I was in a position where I could leave all of them, and they were always very interested in where I was going. When I started really traveling, I think my eldest was 7, and being the eldest of 5, maturity and well versed in the fact that if he knew that if he was going to moan wherever we went, he wouldn't go on another trip. So that was sort of the ground rule. And this wasn't, going to be a holiday in any standard. First of all, I mean, I have to get permission from the headmaster to have him leave school. It's tricky in its own right. And then I have to have permission from whichever organization I'm visiting I have to have permission to bring him with me. So there are a lot of hoops to jump through, I would say, for every single trip. But because I started when they were so young, they all aspired to come on a trip. That became like a rite of passage, so to speak. I think that the earlier on you're exposing your children to the work that you're doing and to the communities that you're helping, and whether they're locally or abroad, that it's beyond words. And even it sort of takes the financial investment to a whole other level. The blood bank I mentioned earlier, that was a project that actually the children fundraised for on their own, and that a friend was going on the trip with me, and we were splitting the cost of the blood bank, which was nominally expensive, and she said, "Oh, I'll just write a check." And I said, "I can't just write a check for this. The children are traveling all this way. They have to figure out a way to fundraise for the blood bank. They understand the community. They understand the process. They have to be just a little bit innovative." So I would say for the biggest thing is starting early and have it be part of the ongoing conversation. So by the time they're 12 or 13, it's not like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, right.
It's just, it's exactly, it's integral.
So you're building the next generation of philanthropists. Michelle, you have engaged next gen philanthropists in your Institute for Imagination.
Yes, actually, quite successfully. We do it at two levels. One, we do it at the kids that come through our doors, and we offer them, you said the kids have to figure out a way of helping. Yes, absolutely, and they're brilliant at it. The kids are just so creative at coming up with ways of helping each other, because the kids are not the ones who discriminate. It's the parents that teach them to discriminate. So the kids are great. Got to give them a chance to rule the world. Would that be fun? No, but we're working with the next gens, people in their 20s who are of this whole connected world, and they're getting engaged. And we brought them on. We have a board. And they have to contribute serious amount of money to that board because it's got to really matter. And they have a full voice, and they actually get to manage some of the funds that they contribute within our organization. So it's been one of our most successful fundraising tools. They are fabulous. We're very careful about how we curate who we bring on board.
And how are they changing the thinking of the Institute?
They're challenging us. They challenge us, and they have, a lot of it is just they have their own networks. They have a network of peers that they want to give, but not the way their parents are giving, because they want to establish themselves on their own. They're putting together a fundraising trip to the Monaco Grand Prix. Not in my realm of interest, but it is so popular. Okay, so just bringing in new, fresh ideas, and yeah, it works.
Yeah, terrific. So, did you have something
No,
more?
just saying, with my children, they're also part of the foundation. They've got the ability to give money, to designate money. And my number 2 son saw that there was an issue at NYU where there were students who got into the system but couldn't continue. So with his structuring, we put together a fund to allow students to stay at the university.
Okay.
In other words, there's people who fall between cracks. My daughter Mary at Oxford loves the sport, so she's done something for the sport at Oxford. But I think it's important because I mean they are part of our. I mean it's not just me having a jolly time giving money away. I mean it's something we're trying to make a difference. And as we've said, we want to engage the next generation in our family.
Terrific. So we want to take a moment now to invite Mr. Charles Chen to share some remarks with us. And again, Charles is the founder of the Yidan Prize, and which has recently been launched. There will be winners to the prize to promote innovation in education globally. So Charles, we invite you to share some thoughts with us.
Thank you.
And then we will open it up to Q&A.
Thank you. And good morning, everyone. I'm Charles Chen. I come from China. My mother language is Chinese, but today I want to share with you my thinking in English. And dear host, speakers and guests, Thank you for inviting me and the Yidan Place Foundation to be part of this meaningful event. This session is about the future of the philanthropy in addressing global challenges, and I am honored to share my view as a philanthropist. Today, global is a buzzword around politics, economics, and society. Going global was once a dream for many, but not anymore. Many, both here in the UK and elsewhere, appear to be rethinking globalization. Today, I would like to explore a few questions with you, my fellow philanthropists. First, what are the challenges that we are facing in the era of globalization? Second, can education be part of the solution? And last, what role can philanthropists play in responding to these challenges? Today, we are thinking a large-scale rejection of globalization and the free movement of people and goods. One of the arguments that opponents of globalization make is that it steals away jobs. Young people appear particularly vulnerable. Currently, 26% of young people worldwide, some 300 million people, are unemployed. Their rankings are expanding at a rate of 45 million people every year. What will the future be like? Other research shows that technologies can soon automate 45% of the activities that people are paid to perform. In 20 years, about 35% of current jobs in UK are at higher risk of being replaced by robots. In the early 1800s, the English author Mary Shelley posed an important question in her landmark novel, Frankenstein. What happens when we lose control of our own creations? Should we be scared of technology? Technology could possibly replace jobs. At the same time, it also creates jobs. When barcode scanners were introduced to the United States, Americans started to worry that they would lose their jobs to machines. But instead, the number of cashiers employed grew by an average of 2% between 1980 and 2013. To address the unemployment issues, the key is to make our next generation stay relevant to the job market. To achieve this, education has a crucial role to play. Today's education system was developed to meet the needs of the Industrial Revolution, which can be characterized as mass production powered by electricity. But education systems today are not suited to our society in which physical, digital, and biological systems are transforming and combining in new ways. Today's youth must be equipped for jobs they don't even exist yet. As much, it's time for us to rethink who we are educating, how we are educating them, and why we are educating them the way we are. We need to rethink the outcomes we expect. I ask you now, is there a space for philanthropy to help fill the gaps? I believe there is I founded Tencent Charity Foundation together with my partners in 2007. It's the first corporate foundation in China's internet industry, and many projects the foundation support were related to education. In my personal capacity as a philanthropist, I founded Wuhan College, the first private non-profit university in central China, to support the development of Shenzhen Minder Experimental School, which set a new model in public school reform. From my experience, projects and institutions such as these made a huge difference in the lives of the many young people and educators they touch. But I am conscious that what a single project can achieve remains very limited. That's why this year I launched the Yidan Prize, a global education prize. Starting the next year, the Yidan Prize in Education, Research and Development will become the largest educational prize in the world. It's designed to reward innovative thinking that are scalable. The point is not about the money, but rather putting the spotlight on the best and brightest the world has to be offered in the hopes that the groundbreaking work being done by the few will become the resource of the many. To address global challenges, the world needs a global platform. So the Yidan Prize is more than just a competition or award. By using variety of tools, including research, events, and multimedia storytelling, my foundation wants to bring together all interested parties for constructive and inclusive debate to find practical and innovative solutions to the key issues in global education today. As a key opinion leader in your field, I encourage you to thinking about and nominate the best candidate that you see in the education landscape and to spread the word about the Yidan Prize. I consider the Yidan Prize a call to action. Let's create a better world through education. Thank you.
So thank you, Charles. I think a great example of the use of philanthropy is really putting a spotlight on best practices, on innovation that others can take up. So everyone be thinking about who you want to nominate for the Yidan Prize. So we have some microphones here for some questions from the audience. I think we've got one down. Actually, how about we go here, then here, and please announce yourself, and then say your question.
So, Andrew Fairbairn, with a charity here in London called SEO London. We do sort of workplace diversity and hiring and such. We've been very successful with our model, and so we've managed to copycat an idea from New York, bring it to London, and that experience has sort of allowed us to expand to Accra and to Shanghai, to Saigon, and I get calls now about, can we do SEO in Bogota? Can we do SEO in Buenos Aires? Can we do SEO in Cairo? And I'm, as an army of 17 people in a small place in central London, we're trying to think about how we scale. And the question is really, in the London philanthropic community, are there vehicles that specifically think about taking ideas and scaling them, as opposed to, a project here, a project there, something, and so on? Is a hub that I'm not plugged into that I should be?
Who would like to take the scale question?
It's a really tricky
I was
one.
gonna say, maybe that's your answer.
There's a wealth of them.
Can I
Oh,
Answer for us?
okay.
So
And please announce who you are as
Sorry,
well.
I'm Steve Podmore of Transform Global and also BigCrowd.net, and we're actually launching a platform which is about using incentive competitions, crowd-funded incentive competitions, to find what we call big impact game changers and help them scale. So the real challenge is often these projects are complex, scaling them is complex, it's not easy to explain, and as Michael mentioned, you want things that are already at scale to help them scale further. So there's a massive gap. So actually, I have a question that's linked to my answer. And do you actually see, as Charles has talked about the Yidan Prize, how important do you find incentive competitions, if they could be done at scale to help entities to scale? How important do you think that would be to help address what the issue is of the panel? How can philanthropy use to address global issues? We've got to do it at scale. So can you see these being important?
Unfortunately, the problem is yes, right? The detail is massive. Of course, you need to actually have that impetus behind you. Where I get a little bit lost in that is that I am, frankly, as you say, pushing myself into organisations, whether it's the Royal Navy, Royal Marines, or wherever. It's very seldom I'm actually, unless this "you belong" thing going on, where again we're again with the help of Dr. Alisa Jenkins here. We're able to actually make this thing into a more effective thing. But it's a slightly different game to what you're talking about. We're not getting hundreds of people involved in this to make this work. Maybe we will.
Michelle, Alyssa, do you guys want to take the scale prize question at all?
I just think the issue is one of the scalability and capacity building. I would look at it from the way we look at investments, that each country is very different, as we saw in the diversity panel this morning. Some things are translatable, some things are not. And looking for partners, having to have a local partner. And I tell you, it is one of the most difficult things, because not everything is going to work in Bogota, for example. So I wish we had an answer, but I think if you just contact something like CAF, Charities Aid Foundation or something, because they're in touch with so many other foundations, I think it's something to follow up on, really, because it's a need, but I don't think, obviously, the answer is not that obvious.
I just want to say that one just anecdotally, that I worked for years with the Clinton Foundation, and we always worked, sort of the big idea was the driver, but we were always able to deploy staff to a huge number of diverse countries to find the local partner and to scale the model that way. So again, kind of echoing what Michelle's saying, the local partner on the ground is for me the primary driver, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go here, because I promised him at the very beginning.
Hello, I'm Jamie Webb. I'm the fundraising director of the Elton John Hayes Foundation, and also new trustee of the Royal Navy and Royal Marines charity. And just say, Alisa is one of our amazing supporters. She's helped us raise a lot of money this year, and so thank you, Alisa, whilst you're there. I think my question is really around how charities engage with philanthropists. I hear a lot from colleagues across the sector, especially since 2010, where there's huge public sector funding cuts in the UK. The scrutiny on charities now in terms of their fundraising methods have increased, and there's concern that the public are turning off funding charities. So inevitably, they're now looking for philanthropists and companies, but in particular philanthropists. But I think a lot of them struggle with it. They don't quite understand what to do and how to engage effectively with philanthropists that want to be much more engaged with the charity and understand the metrics and the impact. Do you have any advice from your sort of experience of working with different charities of advice to charities how to effectively engage with philanthropists? Thank you.
You want to start?
Yeah, let me start. Again, you can imagine with 200 charities, I've got a lot of examples, some of which are horrific. Where I've given £100,000, nobody's even said thank you. Right? You wonder what's going on there. It happens, and then they come back a year later and want another 100. You just say no, thank you, right? But the point is that it's like any business. Do unto others as you'd like to be done unto yourself. You just think about that, right? One of the things is you want to get some information, if you're a large donor, you want to be treated with some engagement. I'm not even respect we don't need, but but at least engagement we do need information. So it goes on. I mean, again, I look at talking about the Royal Navy, Royal Marines. I mean, one of the reasons why these are very brave men, people I really want to be involved with. But I mean, these are people who are actually happy to engage and they're happy to receive your money. There are other people where it's almost like you're obliged to give them. Well, you know, come on. I mean, yes, there is a dacha here, but I mean, enough already. You know, it's just now what? So I mean, it's one of these these things. So I mean, if I look at what the Royal Navy, Royal Marines do, the way they engage with people up and down there, that is a real way of doing it. But again, the key is to show enthusiasm, to show the various other things, and to show the results. But let's be clear, some of this stuff's pretty dire. I mean, you just get more and more pictures of happy children riding on elephants or something. I mean, you know.
Thanks to your pound.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks to your pound, this person.
Okay. So our time is unfortunately up. So I want to thank all of you for being on this journey with us, talking about the new role of philanthropy, interesting models, the role of metrics, and really looking to scale and sustainability for philanthropy. So thank you all for joining us, and please thank me in joining our panelists.